Good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to the Game Line Wales Online's live rugby show. My name is Matt Southcombe, and I'm delighted to be joined by our rugby expert, Simon Thomas, as we talk through the Rugby World Cup draw, Simon, for 2023. All the teams are going to learn their fate today and who they will face in France in the group stages, at least, at the World Cup in 2023. It's 3 years away. We always have this discussion around the draw. Does it feel a little bit early for this sort of thing?
Speaking of things are early, I see your Christmas tree is up early, and
it's the
glad to see you've gotten the festive. As the viewers can see, I am in full Scrooge mode. In the Christmas is cancelled, nothing up with here, but it tends to be this time of year, doesn't it? It always strikes you as a little bit odd, doesn't it? It's been done in different ways in the past, but it's 3 years. It's 3 years to the World Cup, and we're doing this, and I think there are two aspects to it. There's how far ahead that is done, but also a lot of discussion, particularly because of Wales's situation, about the seedings, how we, given our current malaise, find ourselves in the top seed situation. I think the simple explanation is it was decided to do it, from kind of pre-COVID because, a number of teams weren't playing this year. So for kind of an even playing field, it was done now. But I do also, my understanding is, I think that Gareth Davis, now former WRU chairman, I think he argued that case quite strongly with his role in the World Rugby Board, and I think he's done us a real favour as a kind of legacy thing there with the where he argued for that along with other people, no doubt, because it does mean that Wales are in a much better situation than if they were draw was being and the rankings were being based on the current world rankings.
Well, as you can see there, so we flashed a graphic up on screen. As you touched on, the seedings have been taken based on how they were in January, and you can see there Wales were obviously fourth in the world, and that is why they are top seeds for this draw. Now, if the seedings were taken after the autumn, as they were initially planned to, Wales would be all the way down to ninth in the world, as you can see on the right-hand side there. They'd be in the third seeds, and then that really does open them up for a tricky draw. We've seen it in the past, think back to 2015 when they were third seeds and they ended up with Australia and England in their pool. Now, if you fast forward to 2019, when they were second seeds for the draw, they had exactly the same pool, but you swapped out Georgia for England. So that goes to show how important these tiers can be. So that sort of crystallises it there, really, doesn't it? Just how fortunate Wales have been with this draw.
Yes, and of course it's linked to the other kind of most used comment of this morning that I've seen is that everyone wants Wales. All the other teams who aren't in Tier 1, when they look at who are in Tier 1, Wales is the team they want, and it's understandable given the recent form Wales have had. But the other thing that's intriguing is that for all of this new draw, new ranking, everything, we could still end up with exactly the same thing as we always do. Australia, Fiji, Samoa, and Uruguay. So shall we just fast forward an hour and just let the readers have that, and then we can get on then.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you look at elsewhere in those rankings as well, if you were France, you'd be a little bit annoyed about this, wouldn't you? Because if you look at where the rankings are now, they would be in the top seeds, but as it is, they're going to be second seeds. And I think the same for Scotland as well. They're going to be third seeds in this draw, but really they should be second seeds. So it's and Argentina as well, of course. So you could understand if there were a few frustrations in there from those nations, couldn't you?
Yeah, it works the other way as well, in the sense that, Wales could pick up, say, France and Argentina, and that would not be much fun based on the way things are at the moment, or even, France and Scotland, given Wales recently lost to Scotland. It's an interesting one, having the seeds in Tier 2, France as well, the host rather. Let's be honest, Wales shouldn't be in the world ranking top 4 at the moment, but that's the way it's worked out for the reasons we've explained, and it's going to hopefully benefit them in terms of the challenge they face in 2023.
Let's have a look at the bandings then. You touched on it there. This is how it looks. Obviously, the top 12 teams have all qualified for the competition based on finishing in the top 3 of their pools at the 2019 World Cup, so we know who they are. The remaining teams are going to have to go through the qualification process. But looking at what we've got here, you can only draw one team from each band, of course. What do you think represents a good draw for Wales today?
Well, looking at that there, I mean, you'd probably, although Japan have, performed heroics in recent World Cups, you'd probably say looking at Band 2, you'd look at Japan there. Wales wasn't, I was there when Wales did lose to Japan in 2013. But I think of the three others in there, you'd probably go for that. Then either Italy or Fiji, probably Italy at the moment. Fiji, we've seen what they can do. And Wales, the one team they have been able to get the better of very much this year is Italy, beating them twice, Wales. Generally, you'd fancy your chances against them. And then you tend to get down to the minnows then. And really, if you've got any aspirations to get out of your group, you would expect to beat any of the teams that could be thrown up from Band 4 and 5.
Yeah, just on Band 4, I did a bit of research last night and a bit of prediction coming in now. A bit of educated guessing going on. We think that Oceania 1 is likely possibly to be Samoa. Georgia would be the front runners for Europe 1. USA would be fancied for America's 1, although that will be very competitive. And then Asia Pacific is likely to be Tonga. Out of those 4, I think you probably, for this, I think if you're looking at America's 1 and possibly being the USA, the other 3 are very physical propositions in Samoa, Georgia, and Tonga. So, in a tournament where Wales have struggled with injury, it's probably going to fancy the USA out of those 4, if anyone.
Yeah, Samoa and Tonga, teams Wales are very familiar with in previous World Cups. 2011 World Cup, Wales had a real fight against the Samoans, and Lee Halfpenny ultimately got them out of jail in that game while running with his scrum cap off his head. I'll never forget that. And that was a tough old game. Tonga can be very, very physical, and it's not just overcoming these sides, but it's the bruises and the injuries you pick up with when you play them. So, yeah, I think you would certainly look at the USA there. They've struggled in recent years, ready to make much of a mark on the world stage. And then I think Georgia, again, very physically demanding. So, yeah, I think you would probably prefer to get the USA out of Band 4.
Yeah, obviously these are just predictions, but then with Band 5, the final qualifier is going to be made up in basically a round of playoff matches between all the teams that just missed out on the other qualification places. So, by theory, they should be the weakest team in the competition. So that's probably who you'd favour in Band 5. But of course, over the next 2 years, lots of qualifiers to determine those teams. The draw is just 6 minutes away, so we're just going to keep filling time here until that gets underway in Paris. And of course, we'll bring that to you then as it happens. So we've talked about what a good draw looks like for Wales, Si. What about a bad draw?
Again, it's tricky, isn't it? Because you're throwing yourself forward to 2023 and trying to work out where teams will be then. But I think if you look at the progression and the route of travel France are on, with a young side playing some fantastic rugby and also showing in the Nations Cup final that they're now building real strength in depth with what was effectively, second or even in parts third string side, really pushing England all the way, going to extra time. They got home advantage, the World Cup. Everything is focused on that. I think France are the team you really want to avoid. So that would be a bit of a doomsday one if you got France there. And then it's either Scotland or Argentina. I think based on previous World Cups, Argentina have the ability to really rise to World Cups. You saw it. I think it was 2007. They got semi-finals. Same again, 2015. Scotland haven't had that great World Cup record in recent times, but they too are building, and they, recently beaten Wales. But I think you'd probably say Argentina would be the worst one there. Maybe Samoa in Band 4, and then, as I say, you'd have to wait and see on Band 5. But if Wales had to get through a group where they're up against France, Argentina, and Samoa, that doesn't look very nice at all.
Yeah, and of course, Argentina have obviously gone very well in the Tri-Nations of late, but Fiji's not a game that anybody wants at the World Cup, and my mind goes back to last year when Fiji took the lead against Wales and everything started going wrong for that first sort of half an hour. You know how tricky they can be as a proposition, and they can be a problem for any side when they get rolling. So really, band 3 has got a couple of dodgy ties in there as well.
Yeah, with Fiji, it's always quite different. They tend to go in cycles and phases, and a lot of it as well is their preparation. I mean, we all know with the South Sea Islands, they struggle in terms of finance and availability. But the one thing you do find with the World Cup is that's the one time when they do tend to get most people available. Now, they've also gone through a period where they've had some, fantastic players coming through, particularly in their back division. Tuasava and Nadrada, Bottier as well, the centre. I mean, that was a pretty terrifying backline the Wales faced for that first half hour. And it's a question really of how Fiji develop over the coming 2 or 3 years. But I mean, those guys will still be around, offer huge threat. So you really, as we said earlier, out of that band 3, I think very much Italy is the team you would want to get. All of the other 3 are, major stumbling blocks. Again, depressed looking at this now. Boy, look at it.
I just need to send out a public notice. I can see a few people having a breakdown in the comments on Facebook. Don't panic. Wales have not drawn South Africa, England and New Zealand in the World Cup. These are just the band-ins for the draw. So you can only pick one team from each of these bands. So the good news is that Wales are not going to draw South Africa, England and New Zealand. Let's calm down a second. It's not all bad. They may still draw a difficult group, of course, but we're not quite there just yet. Okay, so we've got 2 minutes then until the Rugby World Cup draw takes place over in Paris. So I know it's a bit of a strange one, right? But with the World Cup taking place a lot closer to home than it did last year, does that have an impact on anything? I seem to remember when Warren Gatland named his squad, a few players missed out because they had they were prone to injury, and he didn't want to carry players that weren't durable, I think was the word he used. Is that going to have any impact on things in 2023?
Well, you don't have the issue of people acclimatizing where they would if it was in New Zealand, Australia, or even Japan. Really, you're very much on the doorstep. So I think you don't have to take those kind of things into consideration so much, and you can basically choose as if it was being played in the UK. I mean, of course, the one thing you would say is the last time the World Cup was hosted in France, it didn't go that well for us, really.
Yeah,
I never got to go down to Marseille in the end. I was all waiting for the. I was going to go back out for the quarterfinal, and then unfortunately, the aforementioned Fiji, again showing what they can do at World Cups. They ended Gareth Jenkins's reign as Wales coach. In all seriousness, it was that was a grim old day. Wales got sucked into the whole Fijian way of playing and came second best, despite Martin Williams' interception late on, which seemed to have saved their blushes. So France, the last time out, wasn't a great memory for Wales. But in terms of the other thing you would say is in terms of Welsh fans getting out there to support the games, it's a lot easier than some of the other locations and destinations. And it's worth mentioning, isn't it, what the options were for this World Cup? It was a 3-way contest to host the 2023 World Cup, which came down to France, South Africa, and Ireland. Now, I still get Irish fans to this day berating the fact that Wales didn't vote for Ireland. But as I say to them, it's not Eurovision. You're not picking the nearest bid. You're picking what you believe to be the best bid. And Wales went with the choice of Gareth Davies, essentially, because Gareth was part of the World Council, but the official choice was for South Africa. But ultimately, it was France that got the nod. I think in terms of infrastructure and finance, those two were quite close and bidding quite hard. But the romantic, and you would have liked it to be in Ireland, but I think you, as I say, you just have to go with what is going to be the most lucrative and the best rugby event. It's really, and France got the nod.
Absolutely. So the draw is about to get underway. If you catch me glancing down to my right-hand side here, it's because I'm keeping an eye on things as they happen. They just seem to be playing a bit of an intro video into the draw, so we're about to find out who's got who. I believe it's going to work. They're going to draw France first as the hosts into their pool, and then it's going to work from the bottom up. So it's going to be that band 5, 4, 3, 2, and then obviously band 1. So we're going to find out who Wales have got pretty late on in this, and by then we should have a good idea of which pools Wales are going to want and which pools they are not going to want. So just give us a bit of an insight, really. Go on.
I was going to ask you, do we know who's pulling the balls out or whatever, however they're doing it?
I'm not sure. They haven't flashed up yet, but I believe it's a number of sort of public figures from France. Hugo Monnier has been presenting the show so far, but I think the people pulling the balls out of the pots are just celebrities and public figures from France. So I'll have to come back to you on that one. But just give us a bit of an insight, Si, for now in terms of how Wayne Pivac will be feeling right now. I know it's a long way away, but it's surely still it's a big moment for Wales, isn't it?
Well, it's the tournament he hopes to get to. Let's be brutally honest, isn't it? You know, there was a lot of talk during the autumn about should you just be looking for results or should you be looking to build a squad for the World Cup. And he certainly, the Nations Cup, used that to a significant extent to look at young players coming through. A number of players made their debut in the tournament, but the results didn't go really the way that Wales would have hoped, and it has piled pressure on for the Six Nations. So it's all very well building things towards a World Cup, but you have to still be in charge for that World Cup. And I think from that point of view, you know, I don't think building will be the focus of the Six Nations. It can't be really. He has to win at least 2 games, I think, to be really safe moving forward, especially when you consider you know, what Wales have become used to over the last. Remember, we didn't do it this year. If you look at back, Wales, you know, won just the one. I think they would need to be a step up and at least 2 wins. Otherwise, you know, there's no guarantee that he gets to be there for 2023.
And I guess that is a point to make as well on this, mind, is that because the bandings was sorted out before the autumn campaign, it changed the sort of complexity of it all for Wayne Pivac, and he was then more inclined to play the youngsters, to experiment with his squad a little bit more. Now, there were injuries as well, of course, to deal with, but how much sort of slack do you cut him for that? And how much of it do you say, well, even making all those changes, you should have been better?
The slightly complicated thing as well is that the players who perform best are actually the youngsters, the new kids. If you look through it, you know, you're talking Shane Lewis Hughes, Johnny Williams, James, both Callum Sheedy, maybe Kieran Hardy, you know, to a certain extent as well. Seb Davis, I thought, did well when he was involved. So, you know, maybe that might, for all that results are everything in the Six Nations, might that have told him that that's the way to go? Is youth the way to go? It would certainly be the way to go if you're building for 2023. And I suppose the question in his mind now in a certain positions is it the way to go as well to get results in the 2021 Six Nations? That's the big challenge he faces. Because you look at that Wales starting, it's Ireland first, isn't it, in the Six Nations? Ireland at home is our first game. Now, if you look at that, you try picking that team now with any surety or certainty. Not easy, is it? You know, the one first name on the team sheet has been Alan Jones for years. But now Alan's, you know, got a nasty-looking injury. You know, you don't know how long that's going to keep him out. And other stalwarts, you know, in terms of Josh Navidi, Ross Moriarty, all injury issues, and Jonathan Davis has had his injury issues. So it's difficult to know which way to go. And as you say, always with one mind in, are we still looking to build a little bit for the World Cup? I suppose the best scenario is to build for a World Cup with a winning team, isn't it?
I've just seen a comment in the Facebook section from Clayton. Their match tree is awful, just putting it out there. If my partner's watching this, Clayton, she's going to be after you. I'll tell you that for free. She's going to be fuming with that. Just watching the draw, I did worry we might get this. They seem to be doing a lot of talking and not a lot of drawing at the moment.
Well, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. French President Emmanuel Macron is on stage at the moment, slightly more high profile than us pair. He's got his mask on, so I can't tell you what he's saying, and I don't speak French, so I wouldn't be able to anyway. So we're just feeling.
Is it Macron did, like Wales style?
It is, yeah. Exactly. So we're just waiting for the draw to start now, and we've kind of covered all bases really. I guess, Simon, just quickly, because we haven't talked about them at all yet. In terms of the actual rugby we have seen recently with the regions over the weekend, I know you were off work, but if I know you would have been watching all the games intently. It's good to see the players playing with a smile on their face at times. 3 wins out of 4. feeling good about themselves.
Yes, I watched a lot of rugby. I was like, granddad, I think it was, Only Fools and Horses with about 3 different televisions on the go at the same time. 2 games of rugby and a bit of Shrek in the background as well. Always the way to go. I really enjoyed Europe. To be honest, I found it a breath of fresh. Not just the Welsh results because they were positive, but generally, I found it a breath of fresh air after, rather sort of prosaic and a Nations Cup, which I don't think really grabbed many people's imagination. And it was really, for me, it was the Bristol Clermont game that set the tone. I mean, that was just an extraordinary game of rugby. I mean, the answer to playing attractive rugby is just never kick the thing and put them to, because that was just an extraordinary game, wonderful to watch. And then you had that kind of game. Then you had the more attritional, titanic, but compelling Scarlet's Bath game, which was really the high point of the weekend for the Welsh teams. And I said this to a few people over the weekend, in terms of yes, 2 of them in the Challenge Cup, maybe against teams that that aren't taking it as their priority. But 3 wins out of 4 for Wales after what's happened so far this season was a real positive, a real plus. Look at it, Ireland only had the 2 wins out of 4. Scotland lost both of their European matches. So Wales, out of the Celtic nations, did pretty well. And it just goes to show, doesn't it, what the difference it makes when you finally start to get some of the leading players back. Although, in credit to the regions, a lot of them weren't back through various reasons of injury, so forth. And you did see quite a few younger squad players really come into the fore. Some excellent performance. Jack Morgan again, that boy's a talent for the Scarlets. It was absolutely fascinating to watch him go up against Sam Underhill. Probably at the man at the peak of his powers, a real strong leading candidate, not just for a Lions squad spot, but a test spot. And that was fascinating. Jack came up with his head held high, and a weekend where we sadly lost Ollie Griffiths to another injury. Fingers crossed it's not that serious, but it was great, given that injury, to see another really talented number 7 add yet further kind of status to his growing kind of color. Really, he just looks, the shape of the boy is like you're not going to move him easily. I like the look of him. Really, really good player.
Yeah. All right, then let's get back to the draw. Then there's still Macron is still on stage talking, so there's not a lot of drawing going on. Let's go back to the bands a sec. Obviously, Wales in with New Zealand, England, and South Africa in band one. Now, again, those are the teams that Wales cannot get. How much of a bonus is that for Wales? Because obviously they've drawn England and South Africa in previous World Cups in recent years, and they were big challenges for Wales in those tournaments. Overcame England in 2015, of course. Lost to South Africa in 2011. So how much of a bonus is it that those teams and New Zealand are not going to be a factor in the pool stage?
Well, Wales haven't beaten any of them in the World Cup, have they? So I think that kind of sets the stall out. Probably came closest of all against South Africa in 2011, open game of that World Cup, and also then again, obviously, in the quarterfinal in 2015, it pushed South Africa very close, and then again the World Cup semi-final. We've had a series, real near things against South Africa in the World Cup. England leading them at half-time in 2003. I remember ringing the desk saying, "Book me in for 2 more weeks. We're going to win the World Cup." It's true. And I'll never forget that day. I might write my newsletter on that this week, because that was an extraordinary day. As for New Zealand, probably one of the most memorable World Cup matches of all Wales had was against them in 2003. A game where Wales were in dreamland for a brief period around the hour mark, before Justin Marshall took a grip on the game and New Zealand ultimately won. But a game that really was a bit of a watershed moment for Welsh rugby. So great memories of games against those teams, but no victories, which just shows, really they are, you do want to avoid them. And it's, those 3 along with France would be the 4 favourites as it stands to win the World Cup at this moment in time. That's a hard one to call. Very hard to call who's the toughest of the lot. South Africa haven't played much of it, so it's hard to know. They haven't really played since the World Cup. England are a pretty impressive unit, although they did stutter a bit against France. And New Zealand lost at home to Argentina. So 3 years out from the World Cup, I quite like the fact that I can look at that and see maybe for even as many as 6 potential winners, because Australia, great record in World Cups when they get it together. And you can never completely rule out somebody like Ireland, Scotland, or Argentina coming through. Maybe Argentina are the ones who, because they've got a good World Cup. So it's looking quite open. Now, do I include Wales in that band? Not at the moment. You would just hope that come 2023, if not being in a position to win it, they'd be in a position to sort of put up the kind of effort they have in previous World Cups, because we've become used to it for the last 3 World Cups. Semi-final, quarter-final, semi-final. So you'd hope that Wales in 3 years' time will be a much stronger and much more competitive unit than they are right now.
So President Macron has been shown off the stage, and we're now hearing from Bill Beaumont at the draw. So again, nothing to report from Paris at the moment, unfortunately. Hopefully we'll have some pots drawn shortly. Looking at Band 2 then, Si, Ireland, now very, very good side in between World Cups, but perennial underachievers at the tournament. I know we're a long way out, but is there any evidence to suggest that that's going to change this time?
I watched them quite closely in the Nations Cup under Andy Farrell to see how they're progressing. I think they're lacking a little bit of stardust at the moment, to be honest. You've got players who've been outstanding internationals for them in Sexton and Murray, probably in the twilight now. Same with Peter O'Mahony. Probably the best Irish outside back at the moment is Simon Zebo, who's unavailable for the eligibility rules. So they, to me, are a side that when they come up against weaker physical opposition, they get it going like Exeter do around the 22 mark, and they're very, very good at that, and just remorseless in their attacking in that red zone. They did that number on Wales, but when they then come up against sides that are able to match them physically or outpower them physically, they don't at the moment seem to have anywhere else quite to go in an attacking sense. So I think that's their challenge over the next couple of years, to try and maybe build that more sort of variety to their game. But they're still in a better position than Wales are at the moment, and they still have provinces that consistently perform week in, week out, which always helps.
Absolutely. There's a comment here from Rhys Andrews saying that he believes that the France-Ireland element to all this looks more daunting than South Africa, New Zealand and England. Is that something you go along with at the moment?
France is daunting. I mean, France are growing steadily. I think the biggest, as I said, the biggest thing to come out of the Nations Cup was what that second string side did against England in the final. Because World Cups, we always know, I mean, Wales have seen this in the past, you pick up injuries. You're not going to win the World Cup just with your starting 15. You need that depth. And that's why I think France really look as if they are going in the right direction. And their top 14 is a tremendous tournament. There has in the past been, people saying maybe there's too many overseas players in there. But if you look at the squad they brought through and the people who played in that final against England, they're really developing a depth. They were, let's be honest, you look at that French second team, a lot of them are getting the Wales first team at the moment. I think it was pretty impressive. Ireland perhaps not quite the same quality and depth, but what you would say about Ireland is that they do have an excellent production line, particularly through the Dublin school system. I look at a young man like Ryan Baird at Leinster, I think, in the World Cup. You can see him really coming through. I watched Tyburn yesterday. What an immense performance from him. Spiral kick from his own 22. Should be banned from playing in the second row for doing something like that. I think they've got a forward pack which has got youth on its side. Just probably need to work out what they're going to do on the open side. That's one thing I'd say, because they've been playing Romani there a bit. And I think getting the likes of Dan Levy, Josh van der Fleer through and fit, because they've suffered injuries there. But I don't know, be really competitive. And yeah, I think, as the person said, making the comment, either Ireland or France in your group. That's not much fun. And then you got Australia as well. A new Australian team that's quite young and is going to build for the World Cup.
Yeah, that's a point on Australia, isn't it? Like, they maybe not doing so well at the moment, but you can't imagine that they're going to go to the World Cup in 3 years' time not in good shape.
They got a quality coach, Dave Rennie. There are some people who would have liked to seen him as the Wales coach. Did a fine job with Glasgow as well. Really good coaching CV. I think he'll build a side in his model. It was interesting. I mean, a lot of new faces in that Australian setup this year. So it's almost as if that is very much a year zero. Let's move towards the World Cup squad, and quite a few sort of new faces came through who are probably going to be key figures for Australia because they're moving into the post-World Cup era now, and a lot of sort of younger backs coming through as well, and the kind of James O'Connor back in the scene. So they're an interesting side, and I'm trying to think whether Wales play them next autumn. I'll have to double check the games we've got coming up, but I think in 3 years' time, if they can build and keep that young side together, they'll be an interesting team to watch, and another one you probably wouldn't ideally want to have in your group. Because of Japan, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, exactly. And that's why we said that in the best case scenario, Wales might draw them in the World Cup. Speaking of the draw, we're still just talking on stage at the moment. There's not a lot happening. So I wish there was more we could tell you.
Well, the interesting you mentioned Japan. I mean, in a way, they're the worst case, aren't they? Or the best worst case, if you know what I mean? Because what they've done in previous World Cups, I mean, I think of all the World Cup matches I've ever watched, and I'll tell you where I was. I was in the Arms Park in the World Cup village, where on the day that Japan beat South Africa. And I'll never forget one single Japanese fan was there, and he got cheered around the Arms Park by all the other fans, mainly Irish, who were there because Ireland had played Canada that day. That's one of the great World Cup victories. That try at the end, and also their performance in beating Ireland and then Scotland in the World Cup they hosted.
Yeah,
rugby has really sort of come on, and Eddie Jones played his part with a different there, Jim Joseph as well. Now, and obviously what you're seeing as well with Japanese domestic rugby is a lot of top quality players going to make their living out there, strengthening that. Just this weekend, we saw what Matsushima did on the wing. Well, he played fullback actually for Claremont on the weekend. Hat-trick of tries. Just one of the most exciting players in the world rugby at the moment. And their back three in the last World Cup was a joy, just a joy to watch. The thing with them is always with them getting enough ball. But again, if that's the best option for us in Bantu, it shows that Bantu is a pretty scary place.
Yeah, absolutely. I was fortunate enough to be out in Japan, obviously, last year for the World Cup. I was in Tokyo when they beat Ireland, and it was just an unbelievable atmosphere out there. Rugby had clearly sort of gripped the nation in many ways. You could go to parts of the major cities because they were so big and not realize the tournament was on. But if you found yourself in the right places and in the bars, I'll never forget watching that game. I had to watch it through a window of a pub in Tokyo because I couldn't get in. Me and a few of the other journalists just trying to catch a glimpse of what was going on. But phenomenal atmosphere. I just wonder though if they'd be able to recreate that sort of thing, now without the home support. But that'll be interesting to see. I got a comment here asking what time the draw starts. Well, in short, we thought it was going to start 15 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago even now. But unfortunately, we're still talking on stage and playing montage videos. But as soon as the draw does get underway, we'll bring it all to you live, and me and Simon will be reacting to it as it happens. But for now, let's keep filling time until that does take place.
I was going to say about Japan as well, Matt. That was the real. Listen, these are unprecedented. These things happen. It was a shame that they weren't able to be involved in the Nations Cup. Because if I look at that tournament, as I say, it was pretty drab and dour at times. But one of the games I enjoyed most was Fiji against Georgia, because it suddenly had that kind of, it was quite pertinent. It had that kind of World Cup feel to it. The kind of group match there. Perhaps what wasn't the kind of game that so many people have been talking about before the tournament, but the kind of game that really grabs the imagination. Because the one that perhaps fits into that bill in the last World Cup was the Fiji Uruguay game, wasn't it? Where Uruguay beat a kind of Fiji. I really enjoyed that game, and it would have been great to see Japan involved in the tournament, because obviously Georgia came in to take their place. But we all know the reasons why that can't happen. Now, the other thing that's going to be interesting to see is just how soon these countries that haven't played much rugby since the World Cup, you're talking South Africa, talking Japan, to an extent the South Sea Islands as well. I mean, how are they going to be when are they going to be able to be back up and running? You would hope, fingers firmly crossed, the vaccines are rolling out now, potentially by next summer, and things will be able to return to normal, because that's going to be a key, isn't it? They've got a lot of time to catch up on in terms of players coming through. And there's players, some players are missing maybe 20, 50, 20 test matches potentially with the shutdown. If you look at South African players, they were in such a good place after the World Cup, South Africa, and it's all gone on a halt there. But of course, the other interesting thing is that come next season, South African rugby is going to be very much in our focus and very much in our kind of view, because you've got the 4 Super Rugby sides coming on board to form the Pro 16 from September, October 21. And it'll be fascinating to see how that is utilised in terms of the development of their players. Because obviously a lot of South African Springboks players do play for English and French clubs and Japanese clubs. But that would give us an opportunity to see the younger and the prospective Springboks coming through. So, yeah, South African rugby is something we're going to be much more aware of, I think, over the next couple of years. Yeah,
absolutely. There's a comment coming in here saying France and New Zealand in the same group with Argentina would be good. Says Ben Evans. I think as a Welsh fan, you may be looking at that and saying, "Yeah, all the best. You guys crack on. We'll watch that one from afar."
Well, there's good in terms of rugby, and then there's good in terms of Wales's prospects of getting out of the damn thing. And I think if we're in a group with, goodness me, France and Argentina and Samoa, it becomes difficult. And a group of South Africa, England, New Zealand, Wales would be that would be very tricky. So luckily, that's just a band. Listen, the thing with this is that it is so difficult to predict with absolute certainty, because there are 3 years to go. If you'd have asked, if we'd done this conversation a year ago, then you would have very much been talking about Wales as a contender to win the World Cup. And that's what we have become used to. Wales very much at the business end of the tournament. Right now, we're down in 9th in the world, aren't we? So, we're in a different position. We're just hoping that the next 3 years proves to be an upward curve for us. A curve that would enable us, whoever we get in the draw in the next half hour or so, to at least be really competitive and make a good fist of it, because that's what we've become used to. And we've become used to our status and our standing on the world stage being a high one and gaining real respect on the international platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So the draw, it looks like we're getting closer and closer to something happening. We're just going through
waiting for Brexit.
We're just going through the teams now that have qualified and the ones, as we've touched on earlier, that are yet to qualify for the tournament. I've had a comment coming here from Alan Edmonds, Simon Thomas.
Oh dear. What have I done wrong? What have I done?
Can rule changes come in before the tournament that could have a big influence on the style of play and the outcome? Now, the one that jumps to mind immediately, which we all talk about at the moment, is the caterpillar ruck. When you have a bunch of forwards sort of elongating the ruck, taking the ball further away from the defensive line so that a scrum half can stand there for 5 seconds. He's allowed to, but it's usually about 10 seconds, and then kick the ball away. Now, that is seen by many people as a scourge on the game. Can you see them doing anything about that in the next 3 years?
Yeah, I think that'll be gone, especially with the World Cup being the absolute sort of window of rugby. They won't want it to be insect infected with all these caterpillars. I think that'll be gone. I mean, the other one that's going to absolutely dictate rugby over the next 3 years and beyond is the spectre of litigation, let's be honest, in terms of head injuries, brain injuries, because I think all those people who the world's rugby were doing in terms of trying to reduce head contact, I constantly was saying to people, there's 2 aspects to this. There's player safety, has to be paramount, but there's also, you've got to be aware of the threat of litigation. We saw it in American football you had to be seen to be taking action. And now what's happened and what's happening now in terms of the legal action the number of players are taking is proof of that. Now whether I'm not a legal expert, whether they have strong cases, we'll have to wait and see. But it does show the litigious nature of sport. I think with this in mind, you will probably you won't see a U-turn away from trying to protect the head. You'll see it re-emphasized again. I think there will continue to be less and less tolerance for contact with the head. We see it with the high shots, the high tackles. I think the other one you're going to inevitably have to see a crackdown on is the clearing out of the rucks, because that is where players are very vulnerable. We talked about it before. The new interpretation with the jackal given more rights on the ball seemed to me to be an attempt to safeguard that player more, because players they're given penalties so quickly now, protecting them for the clear out. You can see why they've done that, but it's had a counterproductive effect with teams now frightened to carry the ball into contact. There's a classic one in the Scarlets Bath game. Anthony Watts beat 3 men, scythed his way through, tackled, turnover, Jack Morgan on him, penalty. They gained 20 yards and lost a penalty. Teams are almost frightened to attack now. That's why that's why the Exeter way, the attack with a latch, attack with a latch, attack with a latch. That's you're not going to lose the ball so easily. So I think once again, it wouldn't surprise me if they look to tinker with the breakdown laws again. But I think in particular, acting really clamping down hard. And we saw a couple of examples in the Nations Cup, clamping down hard and players just flying and off their feet, no control, right around an area where heads are bowed over the ball. I think that has to be the next one to be clamped down on.
Yeah, because there's a lot of talk about the tackle at the moment, and obviously it's coming into sharp focus when we've heard the sort of harrowing stories really of the former players. Alex Popham, former Wales international, one of them telling his story last week. In terms of the tackle and the way that concussions are currently handled, you hear people like Sam Warburton talk about the fact that you'll never make rugby safe. I might have to just hold that thought for now, because I think we might be drawing some balls. As I said, France. I think we're drawing some balls here. France as a host, I think their band is being done first.
Pool A.
Hang on. And France have got Pool A. So there we go. We're starting to build a picture.
Action!
Starting to build a picture of what's going to happen. Yes, here we go. Indeed. So there we go. France in Pool A. Difficult to analyse that because they're the first team to be drawn at this moment in time. I think we're going to get back now to sort of introducing the rest of the guests who are going to be drawing balls, a bit like the X Factor. They're coming down on stage with lights and everything flashing. So I think we might have a little bit of time here to carry on that discussion. You hear people like Sam Warburton saying you can never really make rugby safe, but I guess you can make it safer. And as for the tackle and the way concussion is dealt with, is there much more they can do there, or is the ruck really the area that they should be focusing on?
I think in terms of the safety aspect now, you saw at the weekend, like the Scarlets game, Jake Paul and Tulipi Faletau had a clash of heads. Jake was off straight away. And what was interesting was that Faletau carried on pretty quickly. But I think because they were able to review it and look at it, see that the moment of contact, he did sort of shudder a little bit. And that they picked up on that and pretty quickly had him off as well. I think you're going to see a lot more HIAs, a lot less players returning. I think you're going to see it's going to be a lot stricter. You don't that often now see players coming back to you. HIA quite often means the end of the game. I think there was one in the Glasgow Exeter game yesterday where one of the players you could see wanted to stay on, but it was very much was taken out of his control. I think it was one of the Glasgow players taken out of his control. He said, and the medical experts came and said, "No, off you go." I think that there's going to be much more scrutiny on it, and I think teams are going to be even more risk averse, which is probably right. It's interesting, of course. Then the other thing that the boss, Mr. Edmonds, raised about laws. The other one is what will you see in terms of numbers of replacements and ability to make replacements? There are people talking about, well, should we perhaps go back to the old, amateur era where you could only make a replacement that was injury related. Therefore, players are able to sort of front and don't come in. And lots of players, aren't coming on fresh of the 60 minutes, huge giants of men. So that might be another thing. But I think we've more action with Pool A by the look of it now.
Yeah, we have had some more action, and Africa 1 have been drawn into Pool A with France. Now, if you read my predictions, that's going to be Namibia. Now, obviously, they're going to have to go through a qualifying process, so that's not set in stone. But we think there's a good chance that could be a team like Namibia. Now, that's obviously a fairly decent draw for France.
Well, that's also the Europe 2 going to Pool B with Namibia. Lots of recent Welsh coaching involvement there with Phil Davis, Dale McIntosh, and Mark Jones there. So if we get them, we'll know who to go to for getting information about Namibia.
Yeah, Europe 2 is an interesting one because normally that would be a team like Russia. But at the moment, if you looked at the standings in the European qualification, it would be Portugal. If you took the standings from this year's Rugby Europe Championship, which is quite an interesting one. It'd be good to see a new team like Portugal. Not somebody we've seen too much on the international stage, so that would be cool.
And for the qualify winner, what's that likely to be?
The qualifier winner is going to be basically the winner of a playoff between the teams who just missed out by one spot in all the other qualifiers. So that's probably, in theory, going to be the weakest team in the competition, and they've been drawn into Pool C.
So that could be Uruguay if they lose Canada, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it could be teams like that.
And America's 2 is Canada likely?
Yeah, America's 2 is actually the teams you just mentioned. So that would likely be Canada, but possibly Uruguay. So America's 2, I believe, would involve it's a playoff between the South American sides and the runner-up from the North America competition. So that's likely to be a playoff between someone like Canada and Uruguay. So the winner of that match.
Yeah, a little bit of topical news for you. A little bird told me over the weekend that Wales may be playing Uruguay next summer when they go to Argentina. Suggestion maybe of a third test in Montevideo. So keep eyes open for that one.
Absolutely, yeah. Wales going to Argentina next summer would be an interesting one. Tour that they really need, isn't it? Because obviously we talked about the progression of the squad. I think that Argentina tour was big for Warren Gatland in 2018. I've just got a quick few minutes here, Si, while they're introducing the next guest. So be a good tour that for Wales. Well,
the other thing, of course, let's be brutally honest, if you were picking the Lions squad at the moment, we wouldn't be having the same kind of Welsh engines we've become used to in recent trips. I can remember the 1993 Lions tour. We had, I think it's just 3 or 4 players on it. And I'm not saying it'll be that few. For one thing, Lions squads are quite big these days. But at the moment, teams from other countries are probably pushing ahead of us. That being the case, you could see that tour party to Argentina being quite a strong one, really. But it really depends what's left in terms of the Lions, and the Six Nations will have an impact on there. I see more. We're starting to see some real shape taking form in Pool A now.
So Pool A have got America 1 in there, which in theory could probably be the USA again. They're going to have to qualify in that position, but it's likely that it could be a side like USA. So that's turning into a decent pool for France. The next one through in Pool B is Asia Pacific 1. I think that may be a team like Tonga. There's a very convoluted qualification route there, and if Wales are in that pool, I'll explain it to you a little bit later on, but it's a good chance that could be a side like Tonga. So far that could be a Tonga-Portugal pool. Looking at Pool C, Europe 1 is likely to be Georgia, based on the standings at the moment. So Georgia and the qualifier winner possibly in Pool C.
And did you say Europe 2 is more than likely to be Russia or Romania? Or
Europe 2 is more than at the moment it would be Portugal, but Romania and Russia, teams like that would come into it as well.
All right, the Oceania 1, that's likely to be Samoa or Tonga, isn't it?
That's likely to be Samoa or Tonga, yeah. I would suggest that would be Samoa, but again, that's going to need to be a qualification process that they go through. So there's a bit of shape taking place.
That's Wales group, because I'll be Samoa and Uruguay. That's us. That's what we always get down.
Absolutely.
My prediction.
We've had a recent history with Uruguay and obviously Samoa in the past as well. We had Uruguay at the last 2 World Cups and Samoa at the ones before.
I fancy Uruguay against Canada at the moment. And I thought they did quite well in the World Cup. I thought Uruguay made Wales look quite ordinary for a large chunk of that group match, didn't they?
Well, yeah, they did, and I know Wales made a lot of changes for that match, but I remember watching the first half really, and Uruguay were right in the match. They were very niggly, lots going on off the ball in that game, if I remember rightly. Bit unpleasant at times, I'll be honest with you. Some of the things I picked up while I was there. I remember the captain screaming in, I think it was Hadley Parks' face, as they were going down the tunnel at half time, and there was a little bit of pushing and shoving in the tunnel, which was a little bit ugly to see. But yeah, that's what I suppose teams from that level have to do to get in the faces of the sort of tier 1, tier 2 nations.
Where Canada, who I recall, being a real force in the World Cups towards the end of the last century, in the 99 World Cup, 95, they were a very competitive physical side, the likes of Dan Barr there, Gareth, Reece pulling the strings. They've slipped down the international pecking order a little bit. Obviously, Kingsley Jones has been out there trying to sort of build things up. They would not be one of the sort of more daunting sides to face. So as I say, it wouldn't surprise me if Canada struggled against Uruguay if it came down to that. Now we're starting to see some real action now, aren't we?
So France have just been drawn with Italy in Pool A. That's not a bad draw for France. It's probably one of the better sides out of the third pot that they could have had.
Scotland.
Scotland have gone into Pool B with Asia Pacific 1 and Europe 2, which we think may be teams like Tonga and Portugal. Not a bad draw for the Scots, that. But we remains to be seen who will join them in that pool.
So Fiji now have gone into Pool C.
With Europe 1, which we think may be Georgia. There's a good chance that's Georgia. And the final qualifier, who, as we've said, in theory should be the weakest team in the competition.
And here's the one Wales don't want, Argentina. That's our group, I'm telling you, Pool D.
That's Argentina, Oceania 1, who's likely to be Samoa at the moment, and America's 2, which could be a team like Canada or Uruguay. So that's not a particularly easy one. A very physical pool, that, with Samoa and Argentina in the mix, and Uruguay will throw it about as well and put in the physicality. So that's a tricky pool shaping up as well, Si.
So we're really at the base end now. The next one is going to be the real key one. I mean, if you got to Pool D there and say Ireland went in alongside them, you'd want to avoid that one.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah, you don't want to be anywhere near Pool D. I got a horrible feeling. That's got Wales' name written all over it. Like that.
I mean, I know we said Wales wanted to avoid France, but Pool A is actually shaping up as a fairly decent draw at the moment. So you'll have France and Italy in there, along with America's 1, which I believe is probably likely to be the USA, as we've touched on, and Africa 1, which is likely to be a team like Namibia. Now, that's not a bad pool, all told so far.
No, it's not. So with France having gone up, have we got 4 teams in France's group so far, or is it just the 3?
Yeah, so because France are the hosts, they were drawn first. And
so you got France, Italy, and the other 2?
France, Italy, Africa 1, which is likely to be Namibia, and America's 1, which is likely to be the USA.
I mean, I think Wales would take that now, wouldn't they?
So I think that is, if you're in Band 1, that's the pool that I think you want at the moment.
That's the irony, isn't it? You've got the mixture there of the strongest Band 2 team in France, but the weakest Band 3 Italy. So that suddenly has changed its complexion. Whereas you look at the other one, Argentina, if you've got Argentina plus Ireland or plus Australia, that ain't so clever, is it?
No, exactly. It's an interesting little dynamic that's coming up now, isn't it? Because it's kind of like, what do you fancy? Do you think Wales could beat France at home in a home World Cup for France?
Oh, I would take it to the quarterfinals where we are now. So, and that being the case, I'm more than happy with that draw, because I think whatever happens over the 3-year span, you would always expect Wales to win. Ireland and Scotland have got themselves together again.
Okay, so there it is. Ireland and Scotland have been drawn into the same pool, Pool B, with Asia Pacific 1, which is likely to be Tonga. And we're moving on at a pace here. Australia, this is
Wales group.
Australia, Fiji drawn together with Europe 1, which is likely to be Georgia at the moment.
And Japan and Argentina.
And Japan and Argentina have been drawn together with Oceania 1 and America 2. So Oceania 1 likely to be Samoa, America 2 is likely to be Canada or Uruguay. That's not shaping up to be too bad a group either side.
You're not getting the doomsday scenario of the strongest tier 2 and the strongest tier 3 or band 3 coming together. That's what you really feared, and you haven't really got that yet. Japan and Argentina, if you got that, wouldn't be easy, but you'd feel very comfortable about it compared to what could have come out with this draw. Who was it with Ireland? It was Ireland and Scotland, wasn't it?
Ireland, Scotland.
That would be tricky. That would be very much a Six Nations group, wouldn't it? Very tricky.
You just hope that Wales don't draw Pool C now, which is Australia, Fiji, Europe 1, which is likely to be Georgia, and the qualifier, because then we're very much looking at an almost identical pool to the last 2 World Cups.
And what would be the last team in that group?
It would be the final qualifier,
which could be Uruguay. Australia, Fiji, Uruguay, and Wales. Wales.
Yeah. So you want to try and avoid
Georgia.
that one, really.
And Georgia.
Of course.
That's basically the group we always get.
It's exactly the same group that Wales had at the last World Cup.
We don't want that, do we?
It would be nice to see Wales face a few different teams, wouldn't it?
What group are we saying? Is that Pool C? That one you were talking about?
That's Pool C, yeah. So we want to try and avoid Pool C.
Right. I'd be quite happy to see Wales pop up in Pool 1 quite soon, alongside France and even in. I think Pool A and Pool D. I think that would be the 2 best. Probably looking at it at the moment would be the 2 best options, because you're either looking the other 2, then is Ireland and Scotland. We've lost 2 this year, and Fiji and Australia, which can be very, very difficult. So I think
it would be a hell of an occasion as well, wouldn't it, to play against the host, especially a team like France, who.
Yeah. I think the way it's shaping up, Wales want Wales to get a Pool A or Pool D. Or Pool A, New Zealand. Oh.
That's going to be a very interesting fixture, isn't it? With the All Blacks facing the host in Paris.
You can see that being the opening game of the World Cup, can't you? New Zealand v France.
Yeah, that'll be a fantastic occasion. Obviously, the fixtures, by the way, being released early next year. I think it's in February.
Right.
They're being organised, so keep an eye out for those.
Watch out for that word. South Africa. There we are. South Africa.
South Africa get Pool B.
Lined up for Pool C for Wales.
Don't want Wales to get Pool C. Yeah.
No!
No! I can't believe it.
It's deja vu all over again.
I can't believe it. There is a very good chance that could be exactly the same group Wales had at the World Cup last year.
That is
Georgia will be a good bet to be Europe 1, and Uruguay could very well be the final qualifier. England, there it is. Get Japan, Argentina, and Oceania 1, and America 2. There it is then,
well, you boys.
Oh, goodness me. I don't quite know what to say to that.
I mean, the thing is to say that, it's nowhere near as bad as it could have been, because we've seen from recent experience, Wales have got out of that very group. And, although Wales have lost to Fiji in a World Cup, you would expect Wales to be able to beat Fiji over the most years, and Australia, a young side developing. But it's more the fact that it's exactly the same as the last World Cup potentially, and God, I
can't believe it.
Where you could just sense when that Pool C was building, it just had our name on it, didn't it? I mean, it could have been a worse scenario. We could have ended up in the Ireland-Scotland group, which would have been challenging. Japan, Argentina. I mean, New Zealand, France. That's the draw that's going to really. I mean, who else is in that group, Matt? With New Zealand and France, you've got Italy and.
You've got Italy and America's 1, which is likely to be the USA, and Africa 1, which is likely to be Namibia. So AJ Francis, Australia again. I agree with you wholeheartedly. You can see Wales's pool then flashing up on screen there. We've talked about it at length, Si. Australia, Wales, that fixture doesn't hold any fear for Wales anymore. I think you can say that.
Probably doesn't hold any fear for Australia at the moment, does it?
Yeah, you could say that too, to be fair.
I mean, looking at that group, now that Wales would need to take several steps up from where they are at the moment to be able to get through that group. But if they can get anywhere close to where they were 2019, you would fancy their chances. I mean, Australia was a very tight game. Wales, I think, probably played some of their best rugby in those first couple of games in that World Cup. Fiji, I mean, I have to be honest, I watched Fiji against Georgia, and I think the current Wales team would have struggled to beat that Fijian team.
Yeah.
We would have struggled. And if Wales are still in a stuttering mode come the World Cup, then that becomes a group that you can struggle in. I mean, Georgia, will, they would push Wales quite hard as well. We've seen that it can be a stuttering game against them, but it's just a bit frustrating, really, isn't it? Because you just want to see a group that's going to really excite and get people talking, and everyone's just going to say, "Oh, same again."
It's a bit of a doomsday scenario, really, for people like us as well, I guess. Does it sort of sap the energy out of you a little bit, maybe?
It's like, oh no, surely not. I mean, in a way, you just have to laugh about it, don't you? The thing you can do is just the way the balls have fallen, where they come out the pots. I don't know who was pulling our ball. Who pulled the Wales ball out?
I would love to be able to tell you who it was.
Was it Mr. Beaumont? Was it Billy?
No, it wasn't Mr. Beaumont.
Sir Billy.
I couldn't tell you who it was. I'm afraid. I apologise for that. I
don't know what to say, really. I'm just a little bit disappointed. I would have liked us that. I quite fancied the look of that France-Italy one when that was coming out. That would have been quite nice to have had that to be, involved against the hosts. But I mean, they could have worked a lot worse. I mean, that's a hard old group, Pool B, isn't it?
It is a hard old group.
Because you're looking there, Asia Pacific 1, is that likely to be Samoa, did you say?
Asia Pacific 1, likely to be Tonga. So the Oceania 1 is going to be a playoff between Tonga and Samoa. So the loser of that then goes in to a competition. It's a bit of a convoluted way through, but that Asia Pacific 1 is likely to be Tonga, and Europe 2 is likely to be a team like Russia or Portugal or Spain. Have done very well in that competition this year.
You look at that, and the nature of rugby is that the power brokers tend to remain the power brokers. Pool A, you're looking in New Zealand, France going through. Traditionally, Pool B, you would say South Africa and Ireland. Scotland have gone through a good period since the World Cup, but you would expect, in the general scheme of things, that South Africa and Ireland. We'll leave Wales for a moment. Then Pool D, you'd probably edge towards England and Argentina. I mean, you could see that one coming down very much to that Japan-Argentina game, couldn't you?
Yeah, that's going to be the big game in that pool.
And then Samoa as well. They'd be a team who will push hard. And then, to be honest, if you come down to Wales's group, you would expect, in the overall scheme of things, for it to be Wales-Australia. But if you look at all of the teams who are on the fringe of quarterfinal status, the ones who don't regularly make quarterfinal status, and you look across that whole draw, then the team with the best chance there at the present would be Fiji.
Yeah. Just to clarify then, Europe 1, that's going to be the winner of the Rugby Europe Championship in 2021. So it's not set in stone to be Georgia, although they are the strongest side in that competition. So it's very much likely that Europe 1 will be Georgia in Wales's pool, but obviously yet to be decided. And the final qualifier, as we've touched on, in theory, should be the weakest team in the competition, because they are the winner of the playoffs of all the teams that just missed out by one spot in qualification. So there's a good chance that could be a side like Canada, Uruguay, as Wales had in the last two World Cups. And then obviously the other teams come into it as well. So just looking at these then, if you were to pick the toughest pool, which one would you think is the hardest pool?
It's either Pool B or Pool D. I think the fact that you've got Samoa potentially in there as well, I think I'd edge to Pool D. I think because Pool D could be the hardest one to call. As I say, generally you would expect South Africa and Scotland to see South Africa and Ireland coming through. Tough group. Scotland, as I say, have shown their potential. But I think Pool D, you put England, Japan, Argentina, and potentially Samoa in there. That's a really competitive group. tough, good preparation for England in some ways as they go through the tournament. If Japan play like they have done, then they could come through in that group. So I think I wouldn't call it a pool of death, but I think that's most intriguing as to who comes out of it.
Yeah, just had a comment from AJ Francis, who's likely to be Europe 1 and final qualifier. As we've touched on, Georgia at the moment would be favourites to be Europe 1. The final qualifier is a bit of a tricky one to call at the moment because that could be any number of teams going into a playoff, but that's likely to be the weakest team in the competition because that playoff is made up of the runner-ups from all the other qualifying matches or qualifying routes in the competition. So there's a good chance that could be a side like Uruguay, who could miss out on being America 2. Or it could be, I think, probably Spain. Spain finished third in the Rugby Europe Championship this year, so they would go into that as well. So there's a good chance it could be a side like Spain, but likely to be Uruguay in all honesty, but a difficult one, of course, to call there. I'll just get the just flash back up the pool, Simon. Are we saying that, in all honesty, there's not really we like to go to the pool of death, which is a little bit dramatic, but the toughest pool, and Wales have found themselves in it on a few occasions in recent years. Are we saying that there's not really an out-and-out horrible pool in this competition? Sorry,
it was a pretty horrible one if you're Scotland. I think that's, and if you're Italy, but what you haven't got is that potential group you could have seen, where you could maybe have had France along with Argentina and New Zealand, or Wales, because of the nature with France being in Pool C. I mean, it's France going into that group with Italy. I kind of meant if that happened, you're kind of moving away from the real pool of death, because I think the pool of death would have been if you'd had France and Argentina. I mean, that would have been a pool of death for Wales, I think. So I think with France and Italy together, it's probably taken away from that. But I think that's a pretty brutal draw for Scotland. If you look at that, that's going to be hard for them, isn't it?
I guess by default, then there's not really an easy pool either. Then is there? There's kind of just four sort of middle ground.
I think Pool A, that looked pretty dusted from day one, didn't it? New Zealand, France.
Yeah. So are we looking at then? If you were looking at these pools now, I know we're 3 years out, but are we looking at the top two teams in every pool right now being the favourites to go through?
I think I'd say it's a 50-50 call with Japan and Argentina. And at this stage, it'd be a 60-40 in favour of Fiji against Wales, purely looking at the way Wales have played and the way Fiji have played. Now, I think come the World Cup, you hope that balance would tilt more in Wales's favour and that Wales will develop and progress. But an awful lot can happen in 3 years in terms of Wales. An awful lot has happened in 1 year in terms of Wales, isn't it?
It has indeed, yeah. Absolutely has.
I'll tell you what viewers, if they're still watching, would be interested to know, and I don't know if that's clear yet, is the pathway from those groups. Has that emerged from what they've outlined so far? Who would play who? So, for example, if Wales finished first or second in Pool D, do we at this Pool C, do we know at this stage they'd meet in the quarterfinals?
Yeah, we haven't seen any of that pop up. You may be able to figure it out now, but I think when the fixtures come out in, I believe it's at the end of February next year, there'll obviously be a far more clearer picture of who's playing who in the knockout stages. I think doesn't it tend to be Pool A plays Pool D and Pool B plays Pool C?
Yes.
I
mean, you could be looking at Wales versus South Africa in a quarterfinal.
Yeah, I think once you get to the quarterfinal stages of a tournament like that, it's kind of, you could be playing anyone really. They're all going to be good teams at that stage, aren't they?
Well, so it really is deja vu, isn't it? We bow out to South Africa. We've done that for the last two, haven't we?
Yeah, we have, yeah. All right, then I think we're going to wrap it up there. We've been on for an hour and 10 minutes almost. The draw took a little bit longer to get going than we anticipated. But there it is then.
Thank you all for watching.
Yes, thank you all for watching. And after all that, there's a good chance Wales could be playing the four teams that they played last year in Japan in 2019. Wales have been drawn then in Pool C with Australia, Fiji, Europe 1 and the final qualifier for the 2023 World Cup. As Simon said, thanks for watching, thanks for commenting. Thanks to Ben James, who's been behind the scenes, hitting all the buttons for us, making all the graphics pop up on screen and giving you the information. Si, thanks for joining us. There's going to be a lot more to come from this now. Wayne Pivac's going to be speaking to the press, I believe, out in Paris, and you can catch all the reaction to that right here on Wales Online.